And we're going to continue with a reading from Mark chapter 8, verses 31 to 38. So yeah, again, we're rethinking suffering and death. Jesus is going to help us do that. So these are up on the screen. If you could keep clicking through them, Matthew, thank you. Starting at verse 31, Jesus then began to teach them, that's the 12, that the Son of Man, this is the vision Daniel had of one looking like a son of man seated on the clouds of heaven. And Jesus said, okay, that guy, the Son of Man, must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed, and after 3 days, rise again. Jesus spoke plainly about this, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But when Jesus turned and looked at his disciples, he rebuked Peter. "Get behind me, Satan," he said. "You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." Then Jesus called the crowd to him along with his disciples and said, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his Father's glory with the holy angels." All right. I'm going to put up a picture on the screen, and I want anybody who recognizes this individual, you can go ahead and let us know who he is. I'll be impressed if you recognize him. It's not James Bond. Yeah, you guys got it. Navalny, the Alexei Navalny. Anybody know the story? Why he's been in the news lately? Yep, he was a leading voice in opposition to Putin and the Russian government. And 2 Fridays ago, he's been in prison for 3 years. 2 Fridays ago, he died at the age of 47. And so it's a controversial thing right now in Russia. Is it a coincidence? Because we know that when someone is speaking out against something, or when somebody's leading a movement that's causing concern to those who are in authority, what do humans usually do? How do they usually handle it? Yeah. The first point I'm going to make today is that humans use suffering and death for their own advantage. Back in 2020, Alexei Navalny, he was poisoned. I mean, another attempt to take his life. They traced it back to the Russian government. And he recovered, survived the plot on his life, and he was in an interview, and this is what he said after he was well again. "It's difficult for me to understand exactly what's going on in Putin's mind. 20 years of power will spoil anyone and make them crazy. He thinks he can do whatever he wants." It's interesting how humans, when they want power or when they are in a position of power, how they will use suffering and death to their own advantage. Whatever it takes, right? And this is actually what Jesus said was going to happen to him as he went to Jerusalem. He said that the people in power were going to betray him. They were going to, let me read the verse. It's easier to do it that way. "The Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed. Let's just think about this verse for a second. I mean, isn't this a sad commentary on the human race? I mean, it's one thing when a guy's standing up against a government or a corrupt government, but it's another thing when God comes in the flesh to humans. And instead of receiving his teaching and his claims about himself with humility, instead of stopping and considering what their motives are and what their priorities are, humans murdered the righteous one. I mean, isn't this verse, isn't this just a sad, sad commentary on what we will do to either get power or stay in power? The thing is, you don't have to use real explicit violence and destruction either to bring about suffering and death for your own advantage, do you? We can murder each other just fine with our words. And if we're too timid to do that, we can give people the silent treatment. We'll do whatever it takes if we see an opportunity. And the sad thing about all of it is Jesus says, if you're going to try to save your life, you'll lose it. And something for us to reflect on this morning is to just ask the question, how am I inclined to respond when I feel threatened? Or when I feel like I'm going to lose? What relationships in my life have been compromised because of a need on my part to win or to be right? Or because of someone else's need to win and be right? Whoever wants to save their life will lose it. You know, we've watched this clip a couple of times of Peter and the miraculous catch. Such a powerful scene where Peter's out fishing all night long, has nothing to show for it, he's a failure, and he comes in and Jesus has this miraculous catch, and Peter falls down in front of him and, you know, is worshiping him, praising him, and Jesus says, "Follow me, Peter. I want you to be my disciple." You remember how Peter said, "Whatever you ask me to do, Lord, I'm in. I am there. You name it, I'll do it." And I think all of us can identify with that, where there were moments in our lives where the love and power of Jesus just had so gripped us and grabbed us. So we're like, you let me know, Lord, and I will follow you there. But then Jesus told his disciples that he was headed the way of the cross. And what did Peter say? Don't do it. Bad idea. He struggled, didn't he? Throughout his discipleship, following Jesus, he struggled to follow along with this idea of going the way of the cross. The sword makes more sense. And that showed up again in Peter's discipleship, his training with Jesus. Remember when that showed up again? Where he thought the way of the sword was better than the way of the cross? Remember when they were in the garden? And this huge group of soldiers came to arrest Jesus. Even asked, "You guys, am I leading a rebellion that you've come out here with swords and clubs?" What did Peter do? Pulled out his own sword. Peter, whoever wants to save their life, they'll lose it. This is not the way of the cross. This is not the way of Jesus. But whoever loses their life for me and for the sake of the gospel, the good news, they'll save it. Jesus never tells us to do anything that he hasn't already done. Who's the one that lost his life for the sake of the good news? I mean, who's the one who gave way to the worst humans can do for the sake of others? So the next point is that Jesus' suffering and death, he doesn't use it to his own advantage. He uses it for the benefit of others. His suffering and death are for you and for me and for the whole world. His suffering and death are the way that Jesus brings Eden blessings out to all nations. Yulia Navalnaya, I guess they say your name different if you're the wife. Is that a Russian thing? Does anybody know Russian culture? Do you detach something extra on the? I was sure to Googled it while I was looking at it, but you say her last name different. That's the only point I'm trying to make, all right? Everybody's concerned that his voice is going to die out now. The mission that he started is not going to be carried on, and the Russian government's just going to be able to continue doing whatever they're doing. Coincidentally, 3 days later, Julia posted a video after the death. Three days later, I'm headed somewhere with this, but and she said that what she's going to carry on what her husband did. It's not, his death is not going to be the end of his mission, right? Jesus said something similar, but it was even more powerful, wasn't it? Death is not going to be the end of me. And if his disciples had ears to hear, there was that little section attached at the end. I'm going to suffer and I'm going to be killed, but on the third day be raised to life again. This is the only thing that sets Jesus apart from anyone else that's been murdered. 3 days later, he appeared alive and resurrected. Nothing can stop the mission of Jesus. And brothers and sisters, this is why we, like every week, we say we believe in the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and the life everlasting. Nothing is going to stop Jesus' mission and his work. And so that means Jesus' followers have nothing to lose. And let's just think for a second about how this applies to our walk with God and the way that we come to him and the way that we gather together even as brothers and sisters in God's presence. Humans have such a tendency to want to tell everyone what they are doing well or what they have done well. We have such a tendency to compare ourselves with other people because we have nothing to lose, because God gave his only son for us, and because he's canceled our blemish record in the death of Christ. We don't need to come into God's presence and tell him all the stuff we're doing right, do we? We don't need to compare ourselves with other people who are better or worse than we are. And so when we come together into God's presence, instead of telling God everything we do right, we can tell him what we've done wrong. And it's okay. We can ask him to pardon us, and he does, richly and abundantly in Christ. And that creates a posture of people who are humble and who are compassionate with each other and recognize that we all have weaknesses. We all have moments where we don't show our best, and we're forgiven by God, and we're here to forgive and love each other. It creates a beautiful, beautiful posture of people who are humble and ready to love and bear with each other, to bear with each other's weaknesses. There's a lot of people who are concerned that this really is the end. Alexei's death is the end of people standing up to the bullies. Death has the power to do that to people. It has the power to lead us into despair and to anger. There are people who followed this movement who are saying, we will never forget, we will never forgive. But then you're becoming just like the people you were opposing, right? So much different under the way of the cross. We believe in the forgiveness of sins for us and for our enemies. We believe in the resurrection of the body. We believe in the life everlasting. We have nothing to lose. Death has been swallowed up in victory. And so we'll close with this from 1 Corinthians 15. My brothers and sisters, stand firm. You got nothing to lose. Death's been swallowed up. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, which, just real quick, is forgiving each other, remembering the poor, bearing with one another in love. Give yourselves fully to that work because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. Amen.